Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Just a reminder, we are being videotaped and live streamed on Facebook. We're going to start out with the approval of our minutes. Carrie, would you kind of do that?
Sure. Resolved upon the recommendation of the Superintendent, Board of Education hereby accepts the minutes of the October 18, 2017 regular meeting and the November 6, 2017 workshop session meeting as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Mr. Brosnan?
Yes, I'd like to do a little bit of student recognition before we begin this evening's program. And just a week ago today, November 8th, we had a very large group, perhaps our largest, involved in National Signing Day. Athletes basically committing to the college of their choice, and although many are involved in practices, meetings, we did have a young man who could make it. I'll get to him in a moment. I'd like to read their names, so if anything, they can watch the tape back when they have nothing to do and hear their name announced and the school that they're attending. Kristen Scudero, University of Notre Dame for lacrosse. Pete, you better be with me on a lot of these names, many are lacrosse. Megan Scutaro, University of Notre Dame lacrosse. Cameron Harloff, Stony Brook University of lacrosse. Emily Sider, Jacksonville University of lacrosse. Sienna Masulo, Pace University lacrosse. Jay Croston, University of Scranton wrestling. LaVey Drumgold, University at Albany softball. Nicholas Bongiorno, Johnson Wales University for tennis. Jared Donnelly, New Jersey Institute of Technology for baseball. Megan Tyrell, Syracuse University lacrosse. Emma Wimmer, Queens College softball. Michael Hagenberger, Lehigh University lacrosse. Joseph Pareca, Marist College lacrosse. Matthew Ventarola, Maritime College football. Colin McCarthy, Maritime College football. Matthew Sejader, we have three interpretations. Sejader, Jacksonville University lacrosse. Ethan Angris, City College of New York baseball. And here joining us this evening is Ryan Piccarello, who signed at Adelphi University for baseball. Ryan, would you please come forward?
Ryan is a neighbor. It's my pleasure. Congratulations to Adelphi University, great school. This is sweet. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Ryan. Thank you, Mike, for doing the honors. I'm up again. My superintendent's message this evening is kind of our opening salvo being transparent. A lot of you might have been hearing about the bond issue that's going around and what we're talking about. So this is the beginning. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it. And you will eventually, down in the spring, we hope to have community meetings at night and on weekends. But I'd like to give you a little background. Over 2 years ago, the district began noting needed repairs to our buildings, auditoriums, and athletic fields. These repairs come at a great cost. The district's budget would not be able to support these needed upgrades, so the board began discussing the need for a bond. Excuse me. Input was gathered from administrators, those in charge of buildings and grounds, and from our architects' 5-year capital survey, which also demonstrated what repairs needed to be done on the Mount Sinai campus. Last March, the board created a bond advisory committee, which consists of 3 board members who immediately started meeting with the district administrators, our athletic director, Scott Ray, our architect, and the chief of buildings and grounds. Shortly thereafter, the bond advisory committee reached out to the community for volunteers who would also like to be involved in an at-large committee who would also have input in shaping and forming the bond. 10 community members were selected to represent the community, and they began their work over the summer by touring each of the 3 buildings in the district to see firsthand what repairs and improvements were being requested. The committee started deliberations across the portfolio of projects with key evaluation criteria, which are health and safety and security of students, how the project will support and improve the educational program within Mount Sinai, structural needs and operation maintenance, and here's a big one, what contained in the portfolio is eligible for state aid, structural wants for improving energy efficiencies, and long-term or future plans for the campus. The Advisory at Large Committee has held 4 meetings to date and continues to evaluate and deliberate the projects requested to ensure that the recommendations to the board and the community are respectful of the needs of our students as well as the costs to the community. The goal of the committee is to have all recommendations to the board by next spring. The Bond Advisory Committee and the At-Large Committee also prioritize the items into 3 categories. Basically, priorities 1 and 2 are must-do items, where priority 3 items are more wish list items or items that would address the campus in the future, but these priorities are still currently under discussion. The board is faced with a tremendous task of addressing these items through a balanced lens. Yes, we must provide for the health and safety of all Mount Sinai students, but we also must address the 3 A's, academics, the arts, and athletics. What do our classrooms need? What do our classrooms, libraries, athletic fields, and auditoriums need to look like as we move into the future? In other words, what will our schools look like and have to offer today's kindergarten students as they move through the elementary, middle, and high schools? Will they be sitting in 21st century classrooms? Brick, mortar, and paint repairs and repairs that involve the health and safety of students are no-brainers. After all, we must maintain our house. The longer necessary repairs are delayed, the greater the repair cost will be. But the plan is to keep the community informed and remain transparent through the entire process. Next spring, we plan on conducting community meetings, I just mentioned those, in the evening and on the weekends, that are dedicated to discussing each bond item. We'll provide plenty of notice, so please make every attempt to attend. Thank you.
So now we're going to turn the program over to our elementary principal, Mr. Catlin, and our middle school principal, Mr. Kremataris, to discuss our K-8 ELA reading writing program.
Would you all join me in belongings?
Do I need a mic? No, you don't. Okay, perfect, thank you.
I'm not ready down.
Thank you, everyone. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is do you want to start, or?
You can introduce yourself.
Okay.
I didn't wait too much.
I saw you moving aside, I didn't wait
Too much.
For those of you who haven't met, I'm Rob Catlin, elementary school principal. It's nice to see everybody. I'm sure many of you probably have met. Pete Kremataris, middle school principal. So I could, great. So I wanted to start by talking about, we've developed a district-wide action plan this year. I'm sure many of you have heard about it before. The purpose was, this is my first year here, but coming in, hearing in past years, and talking to the superintendent, talking to Mr. Kremataris, the absence of meaningful assessment results. As we know, there's a high opt-out rate here. So in a district especially where there's a high opt-out rate, we need to make sure we have meaningful in-house assessments that tells us how our kids are doing in reading, writing, and math. We saw identifiable weaknesses in writing in the past, before I was here, which led to implementation of Columbia Writing Program, which is currently in year 3. We're going to talk a little bit about the progress of that, as well as information that will speak to our AIS, RTI, and differentiation of instruction in all classrooms. And that's some of the things that me and Mr. Kremataris will touch upon tonight.
Rob, before you put the slide, may I?
Yeah, sure.
The first bullet
meaningful assessment, lack of. If you were here in October, you heard me say that in 2013, 97% of our kids took the state assessments. So what that provided the district with was a lot of material, strengths and weaknesses of every kid, every student in ELA and math. Last year, we are down to 40% participation. So we have information, strengths, and weaknesses of our students, a very small group, 40%. We'll still take that. We'll take that information on the 40% of the kids. But we also had, we're relying on AIMSweb, which we weren't totally happy with either. In K through 2, we had AIMSweb only. We needed more information, more systems to provide information on students, having a participation rate of only 40%. When I came in, Rob mentioned the second bullet, Columbia Writing. I first looked at data over the summer, 2014, and I saw that it seems we've gone down compared to other districts. Why? Why have we gone down? Well, the answer was because our writing selections, the students' written answers were not very good. So I thought, well, what's our formal writing program? What do we have? And we didn't have one. So I called poor Jeff, Tree Village, called around and said, you're outperforming us on our assessments in grade school. What are you using? And to a person, they said Columbia Writing. So I thought we should get a formalized writing program and one that's proven successful, not just in Port Jeff and Tree Village, but all over the country. And we're in our third year, and Mr. Kramataris will address that. But here's the thing that where it ties into reading. We are Columbia Writing. Usually you have the Columbia Writing and Reading married together. Columbia told us when we booked them, it's okay, we can marry the writing program with your current system from Houghton Mifflin, which is Journeys. We've struggled with that, the teachers have struggled with that, because it really doesn't marry well. I'll try to put it in simple terms. Columbia stories don't necessarily align with the current reading system with Journeys. So the teachers have to make things fit, that's number one. Columbia Writing is leveled reading, kids reading on their own level, and it's also active reading. The students actually read. And Rob compared to, how did you explain to me, reading kids practice like you work out? Say that better than I'm going to say.
It's the analogy that reading is like a muscle, and the only way to get better at reading is to read and read and read and read and read. And if you're not doing enough reading, you're not going to build the muscle up. So the muscle kind of atrophies in a way. So the way to become a better reader is simply just to keep reading.
So that's much better than I would say that. So notice that's Columbia Reading, active reading. From the Journeys program, Rob and I went out to observe the whole second grade one day. We see kids sitting there passively, listening to a tape or the teacher read, moving their finger along the line and the words. After a few minutes, we saw 5 kids in the whole class were on the appropriate word. We saw we walked around looking at these teachers, we're on our way back, and Rob goes, look, they're still listening to the tape. That's not active reading. So we are exposing weaknesses in our program that we want to strengthen, and we want to have solid, excellent readers in the elementary school, and when you send them up to the middle school, Mr. Kramataris' job is not remediation and making up, but moving our kids up, getting them at grade level or above. So what they told us as far as the marriage between our current system and the writing system is not really happening. That's another discovery. We just want to explain.
Sure. Thank you. So one of the things when I interviewed this summer that I talked about was we talked a little bit about how I asked if people were using running records, and it was one of those things where some people say, was this my idea, was this district idea? It was kind of both. The district was already starting to train and having to plan to train teachers in what's called Fountas and Pinnell assessments. And I'll show you quickly what they are before I go back to this slide. A Fountas and Pinnell assessment is the books are leveled from A to Z, A being very simple books, Z being Harry Potter, Hunger Games, very complex, long books. The first part is it's just straight up accuracy. Can the kid read those words? Teachers making checks, yes or no. Later, the teacher will now make an analysis of why are they making those kinds of mistakes. Do they say car for cat? Do they say ball for bat? That tells me they're not looking at the end of words. This is something I can then work on with that student. I've noticed this. I can communicate that with the parent. I've noticed this about your student. It gives you information to teach. It gives the parents information they can work on with their kids. But that's only some of reading. And I think what the superintendent touched upon was, it's the kind of thing that Ames Web, we already had some of that information on because it was very decoding based. The second part is then we ask them comprehension questions. In the A-level books, it's just what happened in the book. Can you tell me what happened in the book? Maybe why do you think the girl, how do you think she felt at the end of the story? They're very basic questions. As they get harder and harder, this is an H, it's trucks. It's why do you think trucks are important? How do you think trucks help you and your family? Let's talk about that truck on that page. Tell me about all the trucks in the book. You're seeing, can they just think literally about the text, and then can they make inferences, connections to their life? And as the books get harder and harder, those questions get harder and harder. So the teachers got trained on how to give these in August. I'll go back to this slide. That was just how to do it. Trainer came back in October, worked with the elementary and middle school as well, how to analyze the assessment. So now that you've done these, what does it teach you about the students? How can you communicate that with students? How can you communicate that with parents? So I'm a student in your class. I've noticed this is a mistake you're making. Here's something you can do to get better at that. And hopefully, in theory, the student will progress through levels. They were an A, now they're a B, now they're a C, now they're a D, and they keep moving up. The other thing is communicate with parents. I talked about it in my back to school night, and I actually live in the Sachem district, and I noticed when I go to the Sachem Public Library, they have a whole section along the wall, A to Z, guided reading books. And I actually saw the librarian, a little girl came in second grade, and she said, I need books. And the librarian said, what grade are you in? She said, I'm in second grade. And she said, you'll probably read some of these books over here. So you could, and what would be even better is if she knew her level, she would know exactly what kind of books to get that aren't too hard, aren't too easy. One of the things superintendent talked about in the current program, Journeys, the whole class reads the same book. The whole class is reading the same book. For some kids, that's going to be way too hard, and they're going to not be able to read the book. For some kids, that's going to be way too easy, and they're going to be bored. And we don't want that. We want kids reading books that are just right, just the right level of challenge, not too hard, not too easy. So we gave these. These are the levels they're supposed to be at different parts in the year. So you see the elementary from us, in kindergarten, in the beginning, they have dashes because a lot of those students don't even have all their letters yet. They don't have all their sounds. It's not an expectation at that point in the year that they should. However, we do have some kindergartners who are already at E and F levels beginning of first grade. So the teachers test to see if they're ready. It's not an expectation at this point in the year that all the kindergartners are ready. And then every year, there are different expectations that we can communicate to parents. The cool thing about this is, so the grade is what month it is, September, October, November. We're in month 3. If you're a second grader, you should be reading J books. So now I'm a parent, I get a letter home, or I talk to the teacher, or parent-teacher conferences. You know, the expectation is J, your child is reading at a G. Or the expectation is J, your child's reading at an O. So then I have a really clear picture, is my son or daughter above or below where they're supposed to be. So this is what's really great about these assessments. They also don't feel like assessments. It's just a teacher reading a book with you. Teacher just sitting down, reading a book, having a conversation with you. That's a lot more natural. What we found was, the first time we gave these assessments, the lower grades did a lot better than the upper grades. The lower grades, 45% of the kids were on grade level. Upper grades, only 22% were on grade level. There are many reasons for this. As they say, data doesn't answer questions, it just opens questions. It makes you think more about why things are happening. So we noticed that kids may have understood the book, but they have never been asked questions like this before. So when we would ask a student, can you summarize what happened in the book? They might have a hard time. For the purposes of an assessment, we're not allowed to rephrase the question. But if we said, time out, just tell me about the beginning, middle, end of the book, they could do it. So they're not necessarily used to answering those questions, which as teachers tells us, we have to get them better at answering those kinds of questions, but they might actually be better readers and they're showing right now. They were used to, in Journeys, they read the same book for a week, sometimes 2 weeks, and then they would get a quiz on that book. They weren't, as superintendent said, used to what you would call active reading, which is, I can just give you any book and ask you some questions about it. They're used to kind of being telegraphed. This is the kind of question you're going to get. You would read Henry and Mudge for 2 weeks in the class, and at the end I'd ask you about Henry and Mudge. It doesn't really show if you can answer a cold question about any book. Yes, I see Anne.
What's your cutoff between lower and upper?
I consider lower first and second, upper third and fourth from elementary. Mr. Primatera can speak to the middle school in a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to jump in.
No, it's just been great.
Okay, yeah, fifth grade for,
So
yes.
those percentages are for what grade?
Lower would be first and second, upper would be third and fourth.
Oh, so you're not considering fifth and sixth one?
No, I was just looking at it from the elementary level. And,
Okay.
yeah, Mr. Primatera can speak to fifth grade. But this is what we found. Again, I think a lot of that also has to do with the text complexity gets a lot harder as it gets older, which just tells us as a school that we have to get better at answering higher order, deeper questions. As superintendent said, third bullet, students are not necessarily engaging in enough independent reading under the current program to practice those reading skills. So we came into the problem where if they're reading the same Journeys book for 2 weeks, now I'm a teacher, I did this assessment, I have this information, the third and fourth bullet point, they're reading the same book for 2 weeks, they're not trying it in new books, and number 4, they don't necessarily have the books right now to address that because we're using those Journeys textbooks. They need 8 to 10 books a week that they're just going through. They're just digging through and practicing at their level and practicing at their level. So where we are now, we're trying to find resources. We don't have a lot of books in the classrooms. The librarian in elementary school started leveling some of the books. The teachers have turned to some digital texts like Reading A to Z or Raz Kids. It's just some ways to get books that are not too hard, not too easy. That's not ideal. And Scholastic, the PTO, gave us around $4,000 to help us purchase some books. That sounds like a lot of money, but books are expensive. And when you have 700-something kids, it actually doesn't purchase as many books as you think it does. But it is a big help to have so many to purchase books. We also found for AIS this year, 108 students, 17.6% of students are receiving AIS, 27% are on the monitor list, which means they didn't qualify for AIS, but they're close and we're keeping an eye on them. When 45% of kids are getting intervention services, it speaks again, the problem is not intervention services, the problem is the program in general. The problem is the curriculum. You shouldn't have nearly half your students in need of remediation or intervention. That speaks to the program. And it just makes me think, like the superintendent said, Teachers College Writing, Mr. Primatera will speak to in a little bit, has been a success, and there's a lot of progress and success we can talk to in that. Traditionally, Teachers College Writing and Reading are a marriage. Teachers College Reading would allow students to read books on their level over and over until they move levels, get new books, and they would just build that reading muscle up. And that's something it just spoke to for us, was the need to switch to a program that has students reading at their level, such as Teachers College Reading. These are some charts we had up from Teachers College Writing. We're going to transition to talk about writing in a minute before I turn it over. We encourage a lot of process this year in the elementary school, looking at not necessarily the best piece of writing, but putting up that it's a work in progress to encourage students to give their best effort. So this is a personal narrative chart. This is another chart that's been out in the hall. If you notice the chart on the left, it was messy. We want it to look messy. We want students to embrace the process rather than the result. Same thing, third grade writing is under construction. We're talking about working hard. If anyone's ever talked about growth mindset before, it's important to praise kids for working, not necessarily arriving at the finished product. And we're also putting up in the front lobby Writers of the Month. And again, we're not going to put up necessarily the highest, best writer in the class, but the one who put the most work in and the one who deserves a pat on the back for effort. So these are some of the examples of Teachers College Writing happening in elementary school. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Lee.
Good evening, everybody. First, I just want to start off. I've attended a few board meetings since Mr. Callens been approved. He was taking Ubers out here at the time, and he wasn't at the board meeting that I came to welcome him. So I just want to take a minute to really welcome Mr. Callens. It's been a pleasure working with him for the last few months. I valued and cherished the relationship I had with Dr. Gentilcore. He was a mentor to me and helped me with the historical setting of a lot of things that are Mount Sinai. But being able to pick up the phone like I do with Rob Rabel and just talk about this, among other things, to help facilitate the transition team that I established a few years ago between 4th and 5th grade has been great. So thank you, Mrs. Callen, for having that open line of communication. I know we both agree that that's vital to the success of this and our students. one of the things that I was charged with, as Mr. Catlin said, Mr. Brosdale sat us down and said, the board's after me, we have to get reading scores up. You didn't say it like that, I'm ad-libbing a little bit, but we came up with an action plan. The action plan that Mr. Brosdale created, we helped create, and then I went back following that meeting that same day and developed my own action plan, because I saw that we meant business. So what this basically does, and this is part of that action plan, it just outlines for those middle school parents what diagnostic screenings we're using to help identify the things that we talked about in terms of the first slide, with the purpose of why we're doing all this. So just to clarify, all grade 5 students will be benchmarked using the Futterson-Pinnell system 3 times a year. We just are finishing up the first round, and I'll understand in a minute, I'll let you understand a little bit more in a minute why it kind of took us this many weeks to finish it. All 6th through 8th grade already identified AIS students and special education students will also be benchmarked using this. When we met with the trainer over the summer, I sat down with her and the teachers that would be facilitating this, and we talked about why it would be difficult to do initial benchmarking in the upper grades 6, 7, and 8. It would have taken probably until May to just do one round for all of these students, and you'll see why. And having sat through a few observations with this being done with the upper grades, it's a very, very complex process. But we had brought in AIMSweb. Dr. Timo had done some presentations on AIMSweb a few years ago. Every 6th through 8th grader will be probed through, I don't like using that word, probe, but they will be given the AIMSweb assessment 3 times a year. So we will have diagnostic information on every student in the middle school that will give us identified weaknesses or strengths. This is the story for a level U. Now, if I have to, I'll go back, but if I have to, just so you understand, where you saw that first story, it was 1 page, it was just 3 quick sections. This is a story for a level U, so it's kind of right in the middle of where a 5th grader should be. As you can see, it's lengthier. This is what they have to read. Now, the book has parts that isn't here. So in order for them to complete a book, to be able to answer the summary questions and the reading comprehension questions, they have to read about another amount such as this to themselves. And then be able to report back for that other piece that Mr. Catlin talked about, to summarize the story and also to answer reading comprehension questions. So we're talking about a 4-page story for each student. So now, where we start with the process is we identify where the starting point is, because again, we don't have the luxury this year of getting the 4th grade benchmark, where students are coming from, because we didn't have a program last year. So what we start with is a word list. We start with a word list and it gives us a starting point. Students identify words that they can read, and it tells us, you know what, with this student, start at a level Q. So that's what we do. We start at a level Q. And then we go all the way until their frustration point. It could take you all the way to doubling. All right? So you can see why this process in the 5th grade takes a lot of time. I had some students, teachers reporting back, and I observed the teacher doing this. She already had done a level prior to that day, and she was meeting with him the next day. She basically got through 2 levels in a 40-minute period, and she wasn't done. So you have to understand that this is a process that now, once we get the data from the elementary school, we'll have a starting point. So in June, when the students transition over, we'll know when they come back to us in September where they ended. So this process will be a little bit easier next year.
8+
Yes.
you'll have, 6th grade will have 5th grade results.
Correct. That'll be to grow from there. In looking at our writing plan, we had year 3 kind of gave us an opportunity to look at the units. And Columbia, if you're not familiar with Columbia, the Columbia Writing Program, they go back every year and they meet with their teachers, their trainers, and they switch it up on us. The units that you see here were not the units that were done last year. So narrative craft, journalism is a new unit, literary essay. These are the units of study that the 5th graders will be writing on. Each one is based on the calendar of the school year. Because we're in year 3, at the end of last year, we walked around with the trainer from Columbia and we saw that our writing structures in our rooms were not where we wanted them to be. So in order for the program to be successful, there's a lot of close and small group instruction, especially in the mini lessons in the beginning on the pre-on-demand, which I'll show you in a minute, and then again as the program progresses as they're doing edits to their work. So we've taken the time this year to really focus on those classroom structures, and what you'll see here is, what you didn't see last year, is a lot of these areas. This is where the small group would meet on the floor, and this is their anchor charts hanging, so students can refer to them throughout the process. Again, a unit could take anywhere from, depending on how much time Columbia gives you, could take 6 weeks, could take 4 weeks. These items are there for the students to reference throughout the process. Okay? One of the things that we are going to celebrate this year is the student writing. So a lot of teachers have now dedicated bulletin boards. We're going to be having areas where, again, in the rooms these are dedicated for, where we can show like the post-on-demands and try to understand that this is part of the process. Again, it's just some more of the editing centers. These are things that were identified by the trainer at the end of last year that we were kind of lacking, and that's where the growth comes from in the program. Okay? The proof is in the work. This student, September 8th. Anybody know what date that was? Second day of school, right? We're right. Okay? Right here. This is what Narrative Craft started with. This is the pre-on-demand. Okay? Looks good. Nice handwriting. Right? But if you read it, I know it's hard to see, but if you read it, I sat down and read this. It's them telling a story, which is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be like a narrator of an experience they had. That's the whole point of the unit. This is the post. Pre, post. So besides the obvious, which it's lengthier, okay, look at the detail. Okay? Look at how she starts off with a catchphrase. Okay? Those are the kinds of things we're seeing that are going to pay off dividends down the road. So between the F&P reading program and between the Columbia writing program, we're identifying students who need help in those areas, and basically over time, this data will become more valuable. The question always is, well, how many students do we have on level? You didn't address that. Well, I like to think of these programs as informing instruction and kind of telling us where to go. But I'm happy to report that the preliminary F&P data does show that 81% of our fifth graders are at level S or higher. So if I go back to that little chart here, okay, what I basically asked my teachers was, how many people are below an R? Okay, we have 21 students who are below an R. How many people are below an S? That added 10. So S, we're fifth grade, we're at first couple months, S and T. So we have about 81% that are on grade level. All right, S or higher. So we're happy to hear that. We understand that every cohort, and because the process is new, we're going to be examining that carefully with a fine-tooth comb. One of the things I noticed when I was observing was really the uncomfortability that the students had with this process because it's so new to them. And the older you get, it's harder to sit across a table, someone who's kind of, again, I hate using that word, probing you, all right? Because that's what this is to these kids. And one of the things that I'm very leery of, and I try to make sure our teachers, is consistency too. So we're going to be meeting with our teachers across buildings to make sure we're using the same language, make sure that kids are becoming comfortable in the process, we're asking questions in the same way, because that's a big part of this. And that's something that's important, consistency among the program. Because when you sit down and you're trying to pull answers out of a student, kind of leading them with some of the reading comprehension questions or the summarizing questions, that kind of taints the process. So those are the things that we're going to be building on as we get training and meet. So what are the next steps? We do have training scheduled throughout the year. One of the things that we're going to be looking at is starting up writing portfolios in the middle school. Because now we've had a few years to the teachers get comfortable with the program, every fifth grader will be given a binder. They will choose 4 to 5 pieces of work where they will be placing in the binder. They will be decorating the binder, it will become their writing portfolio. I will collect those binders, it will be given to the 6th grade ELA teacher. The 6th grade ELA teacher will begin their writing portfolio. It will be collected and stored until the 8th grader moves up to the high school. It will be their middle school writing portfolio. they will leave here with 4 years, about 20 to 25 pieces of writing. That's not all we do. That's what they've selected each year, about 4 or 5 pieces. One of the things that we wanted to look at was how can we get students writing about their experiences and leading them to their college essay. The question you see here is from the Common App, the College Common App. It was selected from about 10 questions that are offered to students, and it's going to be started in 6th grade. I can't tell you how excited I'm about this. Because for me, to be able to give a 6th grader a question that they can build on each year, and for it to change, I can't wait to see how it's going to change. Because a challenge or an obstacle that a 6th grader encounters is going to be much different, those of you that have had children that have experienced this, from what an 8th grader is going to experience. So, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. We count the time when you face it. They will see this question in 6th grade, they will see this question in 7th grade, they will see this question in 8th grade. And they'll see how they grew as they go through the years.
If you just point out, if you have it up there, but the 8th graders get introduced to Naviance.
Yeah, that's where I was about to end off with.
So
Yep.
it's there.
So this is all going to culminate in the reading and writing workshops. When we do our scheduling, our guidance counselors are going into the reading and writing workshop. It's an 8th grade class that the board supported. Now it's on its 4th year. That is taught by ELA teachers that I hope continues to be offered. Our 8th graders have an every other day workshop where they get exposed to another 40 minutes of ELA writing and reading skills. So guidance counselors will be going in those classes in January around the time of the scheduling process. They're going to be introducing them to Naviance. If you're not familiar with Naviance, it's basically a college exploration program. And it also helps organize for high school students their college application process. It links them with what schools they might be interested in going to. Mr. Dyroff has done a lot of presentations. They have great 8 to 9 orientation. The guidance department up there does a wonderful job of presenting all of this information. The guidance counselor in the middle school met with the guidance counselor at the high school during our superintendent's conference day. So they all got on the same page because what happens is for the 8th graders, the high school counselors come over in February to talk about the 9th grade schedules. So this is all going to tie in together where students will be placing their 8th grade versions of this college essay in Naviance so that it can continue to be worked on at the high school. I made a promise to Ms. Jordan when I was hired that I would make that connection, and I'm not going to ever give up on that promise. So, Mr. Grable and I, we're starting our shadow days. This is all part of our transition team, both grade 8 to 9 and grade 4 to 5, that were started up a few years ago. Okay. The next steps, 2nd and 3rd round of benchmarking in late January, late May, and early June. That's our 2nd and 3rd round. Obtaining resources. We are purchasing level library kits that are going to allow us to now group our AIS students by the level they came back at. Properly placing students in remedial opportunities so that we can identify, according to their identified levels. Again, the information, how it's going to inform our instruction. And honestly, a lot of this is still new to a lot of people. The teachers, a lot of them are familiar with it. We have a great, I appreciate you coming out. Ms. Moses is here, Ms. Canizaro from the elementary school. Ms. Ferraro, the middle school reading department has been phenomenal. Ms. Cavaluso, Ms. Maloney, Ms. Lempin. It was all hands on deck to get this done because it's important. It was important work, it was arduous work. I don't want to get lost in the numbers, but I want to make sure that we understand that this is really going to be something that's going to grow, again, through the connection we have created between the elementary and middle school. And I'm really excited to be able to have another tool in the absence of, like Mr. Brosdale said, the state assessments to be able to help students. So, thank you.
Pete?
Yeah.
Question. So in our second report, perhaps next February, this is round 1, where we have benchmarking primarily,
Right.
right? Baselines established. How will that meeting look different, meeting number 2, than today? When we have the next meeting, what are we going to have that perhaps we don't have today?
Well, I think what we're going to be able to show, hopefully, is growth in those levels. So where if I had a student who was at a level P, how did we get that student to be either close or made gains? That would be my goal for the next presentation. is to be able to take that 81% and help it grow, to get it to as close to, or at least to break it down a little further, where we had this many students at P in December, because that's really where we're at late November, and now there's this many students that have grown a level or wherever they are. And if they didn't, why not?
And Mr. Catlin, I'm going to put you on reverse the role here to speak to you about Columbia Writing.
Okay.
You work as principal in the city, you work at Columbia Writing. We are in our third year here. What do you think of how our faculty is handling it and using it at this point?
I think you're at, as Malcolm Gladwell said, you need 10,000 hours of doing something to innovate, but you have to have lots of practice. And I think we're now in year 3, and I think teachers are familiar with the nuts and bolts of it, how it works, how it looks in the class. And now we're at a point, because we've had experience with it, where people can make it their own. People can say, I like how it does this, but what if I tweak it this way to meet the needs of my kids? I think in year 3, you can make those moves, where in year 1, you're trying to wrap your head around this new thing. And it's kind of like what Mr. Prometaris was saying too, even about like the Fountains of Pinnell. This is new. This is something we're trying out for the first time. Year 1 is, how do I do this? How does this look? What do I do if this happens? What do I do if this happens? You get more comfortable and you can innovate as time goes on. So I see teachers making a lot more, again, I wasn't here, but from what I hear, there is a lot of critical decision making going in based on what I know about my kids and the program. And another thing I wanted to say, actually, which you reminded me of, was Frank LaBianca, Director of Humanities, helped out by getting these LLI kits, Level Literacy Intervention, which our 2 intervention teachers who are right here have spent the last 2 days like exploring, diving into, and we're kind of frantically regrouping our kids into groups based on levels, because just like Mr. Prometaris said, the goal is when we have these resources, the kids should be moving. So hopefully by using this intervention kit, 6 to 8 weeks, some of the kids who are in these intervention groups, they no longer need AIS. Maybe some new kids could come in who need it, and we could kind of cycle kids in and out to get support throughout the year. But it's all hands on deck is a good way to say it. Thank you for coming tonight, because these 2 have worked really hard to ensure that the kids who are behind grade level at this point are getting interventions to make sure they catch up fast.
Let me ask Chris and Lindsay a question. Please
we
answer
have-
that.
I'll give someone else a chance. We have Ms. Massari back there.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a few questions, so if we could spare answer. Does anybody have an answer of how the 3rd and 4th grade could be only 20% of students reading on the grade level, and then in the 5th grade, 80%? How could it differ that much?
So as I said before, I don't think data answers questions, but it opens questions. It just keeps you thinking, like, this is like we've talked about, I think Mr. Prometaris wisely brought up what they call inner score of reliability, which is this is new for everyone. It's possible my teachers were being too harsh, your teachers were being too generous, we're somewhere in the middle. It's the first time doing it.
You know, and I said this, because we saw the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we just put this up there. We've been talking about this. You know, this data right now is not as concrete as we'd like it to be. The trainer even cautioned about sharing levels with parents so early in the program, that like we shouldn't even do it in December when we're meeting with parent-teacher conferences. The decision was made through the superintendent that we should at least vocalize these things, just so that I guess the community is aware that we are analyzing this. I can tell you that talking to the teachers from the 4th grade, because I did reach out because I saw that too, they believe this was a pretty strong cohort. And there are still about 40 students that we're looking at, you know, between, you know, there's 177 students in the grade. We've identified 100, you know, 158 that are on grade level. I believe that a lot of the inter-rater reliability that, you know, Mr. Callan just said is very important. That's why we're going to bring the teachers together in one of the final trainings to make sure we are being consistent in the process. So that's really the best answer I can give you right now. But the teachers were very happy with the responses they got in terms of the reading comprehension, the summarizing, and the word fluency. But there's a lot of pieces there that we still have to work out. That's why I was kind of leery. I didn't put it on a slide. I was told to speak about it. But this data cannot be used concretely right now because the program is just so new to us and to the staff and to the students. Again, I bring it back to the kids because that's the business I'm in. The student was nervous. Now, granted, I was there. I was the teacher. I happened to know the student. So I explained I was here to observe the teacher. But I could tell the student was nervous with the process. It was just the process of reading. He felt like he was letting the person down. So he would like just slow down a little bit, maybe not pronounce. So I think as they get more comfortable and they're explaining the process a little bit more, and now they know from the elementary school what they're getting into, I think that's going to be a big part of this too.
And I think also, as you said, like when sharing information, my thing is if we have information on your child, we should give it to you. But I think that always comes with caveats, like I've had teachers tell me, this student did really well on the Madison Pinnell, isn't doing well in other levels of class. Well, then we should share that with the parent. This is not the end all be all, vice versa. Didn't do well at all on this, doing well elsewhere, vice versa. It's just all part of the picture of how the student is doing in school. It's not, and like we said, especially something in the infancy, but it is good information as to why the student did or did not pass that level that the parent could and should know about how their kid's doing.
What does it mean to be on a monitor list in elementary school?
That's a good question. So traditionally, the monitor list was given for kids who may have scored low, but not low enough to qualify for academic intervention services. It's something I'm looking at as a new principal in month 3 or 4, it's month 3, it's November, December's in 2 weeks. I think, in theory, everyone's on the monitor list. Like, we should be monitoring everyone. We should be watching everybody in the school. But it was always a way of, there are kids who are kind of on the cusp, as, like that chart, maybe one level below, they're not really struggling, but in a way, I almost think everybody's on the monitor.
Something I shared.
That's my job.
Something I shared, and then we're discussing what we do at the middle school is we started pushing in AIS teachers to those students' classes that are being monitored. So we had discussed that it might be something that Mr. Kaplan would incorporate. That he does that already too. I know a lot of his reading teachers do push in. So what will happen is on the monitor list is they'll, instead of being pulled out for services, the teachers push into these classes and work with the general education teacher to support those students that are, so they can monitor them literally in the class, see how they're working, see how they can support the general ed teacher to do those things. A lot of the things this depends on, and that's why I said if we don't see a growth, I have to caution you. I've been in this district now for 8 years, my 8th year, and unfortunately, we provide a lot of services. Not a lot of parents take advantage of them. I can't tell you how many parents decline services because they believe that they'll be okay, they'll get tutors, they'll compensate in other ways. Part of this is going to be trying to educate parents in that, look, we're bringing in these new things. It's tied to a program. We've identified these weaknesses. Please allow your student to be pulled. I know it's hard to say from PE, from music. I get those areas we're supposed to try and help the student kind of get their mind off academics. But if a student's 3 or 4 levels below, that's concerning. And a lot of times it's the parent saying, I don't want my child being taken out of classes. So we're looking at different ways, like I said, through the push-in model as well to help support some of these things. But that's a big challenge that I face.
And I would say, in my 3 months here, top 5 questions I've got from parents, one of them is, what is the monitor list? I think it's a common, and we've talked about as a staff, we have to be clear about why a student is on the monitor list, what it means moving forward, because I think it's a common confusion. It's a very common question.
And my last, and I could have misunderstood you, but from your presentation, I felt from you like you don't think the Journeys program is ideal. So are we looking to start getting new ones?
It's a conversation we've started with the board, started with the superintendent. I don't think the Journeys program does well to meet the needs of individual kids. I think that it's a whole class-based model, and I think right now we have a lot of teachers who actually say, I would love to do a lot of this work, but the program makes it really hard. If they're all reading the same book every day for 2 weeks, well then what happens if this kid's missing it because he's in an intervention group, what happens with this, how do I adjust? In a workshop-based approach to reading, the teacher teaches a lesson and the kids all go off and read books at their level. So automatically the kids are doing work that's right, not too hard, not too easy for them. And it's also just more interesting for kids, to be honest, because if you like baseball books, maybe you go read some books about baseball. And if you like books about dinosaurs, we can give you some dinosaur books. So it's more fun for the kids, it's at their level. You encourage a love of reading because you're reading books just because you like that book. There's a lot of strengths to a workshop-based model. And as the superintendent said, actually, we had training from Teachers College last week in writing. And one of the lower grades brought up the kids were struggling with writing nonfiction stories. And the trainer from Columbia said, well, a lot of these are in books, a lot of these text features they write about, and they said, well, in the Journeys program, they've only read 1 nonfiction piece this year. And the trainer's head slammed on the table. And she went, what? They've only read 1 nonfiction piece, it's November. But that's the program. Whereas if you had a workshop model where you're reading 10 books a week, you would build up those muscles, as we said, that you are reading nonfiction, 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 nonfiction. Now it's time to write nonfiction. I know how it looks because I've read like 30 nonfiction books this year. So there's a lot of, I could be here till 11 o'clock talking about the virtues of workshop teaching. I don't want to take up too much time, but I agree.
And, you know, one of the things that's, first of all, so super concerning to me, and I know that you don't want to dwell on the numbers, that 20%, I'm hoping everybody can agree how alarming that is.
I
But
agree.
from a parent's perspective, who has a current fourth grader, so only knows this Journeys program, we only have enough time in the day to look at Power School, and all you see is how they're doing on those Journeys assessments.
Yes.
And all we have enough time in life is to prepare them for those extraordinary amounts of assessments that they have week to week to week. So I am in education. I can't agree with everything that you said more, but
Yes.
you don't have time to even have your kids independently read, because I'm doing the assigned homework and I'm studying for comprehension and the vocabulary on the same story and going on the Journeys website and reading the story again that they've already read, that may be too easy or maybe too hard, but it doesn't matter because that's all their report cards are showing. So as a parent, you're stuck with this program. So I get it. I know that change doesn't happen overnight.
Yes.
But, and you may not, I'm sure funds are a huge problem with purchasing a new reading program. But maybe starting sooner than later, we can stop with the 75 assessments for Journeys a week and start with the leveled reading groups and do exactly what you're saying.
So
like,
the intervention teachers are almost giddy right now as you're talking about that, because what they're doing right now is we just met with a grade today talking about, well, what if instead of testing them every single week in Journeys, we gave them intense interventions in reading?
yeah.
There'll be a letter going home to those parents. They won't be getting those weekly tests because it's not important to test them every week. It's important that they be reading books.
Right.
So we don't have the resources to do that with everyone right now, but for our most struggling kids, like just flooding them was the term I think Ms. Moses used, flooding them with books.
Yeah.
Read.
And if my son is one of those kids, I'll be
Natural
happy to
catch.
receive a blank report card if you're doing that. I don't
So-
care
so,
about
but-
the assessments and what the report card is showing. Like,
As
this
you
is
said,
what's important. you
the
know?
report card will match the program. So if the program changes, the report card changes naturally with it. We'll get there. But I think right now it's a fair point to say Journeys has a large amount of testing, and I would prefer they read.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead.
When we switched over to Common Core a couple years ago, and the math portion was very new to everyone,
yes,
the elementary school held workshops for parents to come in and understand what the changes were so that we could understand what this newfangled stuff was.
Yes.
And not be as frustrated as the kids and help them along. Is there any consideration to doing something similar for the new reading program so we can help them at home?
yes. So my back to school nights, I talked about FMP because that's what we were implementing at that time. If and when the decision is officially made that we're switching over reading programs, of course, I think it's because as the parent in the back just said, if parents are used to getting weekly assessments through Power School and we're no longer going to do that, we're going to do something else. I don't want you to go into Power School and all of a sudden go, where are my students' grades? We have to communicate with you what we're doing. So yes, definitely there'll be parent information sessions. That's a great point.
Renee, since you got a lot more time than I did, just let me make a comment. I totally identify. Your students go here. My son goes to Miller Place, second grade, as you know. You know someone very well who has a lot to do with that district. I have the same complaint. I know every Friday he's going to have a Journeys test. In coordination with the reading test, he's going to have a vocabulary test and a spelling test, and he has a math test every Friday in second grade. I know what's coming. I try to start on Monday, and it's tough to get all of that and get to it. But as Rob and I are talking about, and Pete, is that our teachers learned Columbia writing. It was scary. It was new. They're getting really good at it right now. F&P, and it sounds just obscene by saying that, is brand new, and it's a new program. Teachers are nervous administering it, grading their kids, and as Pete pointed out, kids are nervous. They've never done it either. Our teachers will get better at it. Right now we have baselines. Now the language is, as the teachers feel, they were brought up being tested every Friday when they were kids. This is the usual, this is the norm. I have to test my kids to have grades. But there are theories now that work better where I can assess my kids every day from things I see. I can make notes, I can keep records, I have a writing folder where I progress the writing from beginning to end. There are participation grades in class. There are tons of assessments that are ongoing throughout the week. You don't have to test every Friday, and I think we are taking a look at it, and I think we do need to take a look at it. But everyone, that's new for teachers too. A lot of teachers working 20 years, they test on Fridays. Well, I guess my wife who teaches high school, why you test on Fridays? You know, what is it? Friday's become a bad day for a kid. Because that means test day. You know, and then the parents, you come home, how'd you do? You didn't get 100. So it's brand new for our teachers. They're going to get good at it. I love Columbia Writing. What I'm seeing, I'm observing all 5th and 6th grade teachers now in the middle school. I've seen 6 already. My 6th today, see another one tomorrow. He came in with me today. Pete showed it up there. It's journalism. Journalism in 6th grade. I was happy that he came to talk to me, and I'm happy I taught journalism and college journalism through St. John's. So I know journalism. So I said, so what does the Teachers College have you do to teach journalism? And it was right on point. Writing the lead paragraph, the 5 W's, the pyramid style writing, most important, least important facts. It was right on the money. In 6th grade they're doing this. And, you know, and I like meeting with teachers. I want to see how comfortable they are doing this. And Bob, I hate to tell you this, Bob, you know what the kids are all watching tomorrow before they write? Even though you cut that tree down in the courtyard at Superintendent's Conference Day and no kids were around, it was filmed. So they'll be watching you and the guys cutting down the street in the courtyard, and there was some shocking things that were happening while cutting that tree down. So we're all going to watch that event.
I don't show up on it.
Anyway, Bob does great things for our district, and he was trimming a tree that needed it badly, and evidently it turned into quite a humorous thing. I saw you right after you cut it, right? And you were a little frightened still. But all the kids will be watching that tomorrow, answering the 5 W's, writing a lead paragraph and turning it into a story. And that's Columbia Writing. That's pretty challenging in 6th grade. But our teachers are becoming more comfortable with it. It's like Brad just mentioned Common Core, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way, folks. It's a new generation of standards. So you were scared by the Common Core. Don't be scared anymore. Be scared by the next generation of standards. That's what you're going to hear about next. And,
I have a question.
sure.
I'm concerned just because we're changing terminology. F&P may use the word benchmark, and Journey uses assessment. It sounds that we still continue this process of data-driven teaching, where, as I listen to Rob, wouldn't the efforts be better served by more workshop-type writing and reading, where there is less time spent justifying what you're doing? That's all these programs, that's what they're doing, justifying what they're doing, with reading skills that are taught, not just assessed. That, you know, you call it, this is now the new program, and it's benchmarking. And maybe we won't do benchmarking on Friday, we'll do it on Tuesday. But in the end, it sounds like we have more success engaging students in reading. So when they go home, they're not so burdened by preparing for the test and coming back to reading for enjoyment. What's the difference then in this program versus Journeys? It's just new.
So, yes, to some extent, I think you're right. These assessments are useless unless you use the information to find out what specifically to teach that student. And in a workshop model, you're reading with students all the time anyway. You're sitting next to them. You should be reading with students every day, small groups, one-on-one. Sometimes when you read with them one-on-one, the cool thing about these assessments is they're more informal in a way. I'm sitting with you and I'm taking notes on what you're doing. As a teacher, it's making me think I'm noticing some patterns in what you're doing. It's not like everybody stopped and tests on Friday. It's part of my normal routine. I'm walking around and meeting with kids, I'm talking to kids, and when I see you reading, I'm thinking maybe this book is too easy for you. I want to give you a harder book. So this is kind of the word is benchmark. You're right. Okay, now I'm going to see, are you ready for the next level. It becomes part of your routine that you read with kids anyway, as opposed to on Journeys, instruction shuts down on Friday and you test. For this, I'm still teaching a lesson in a workshop. I'm going to teach you the same way I teach every day. When I happen to sit with this student here, I'm noticing this is too easy, I might pull out a quick assessment with them. And notice this book is, I noticed something about it, now I know what to teach. It just gives you so much, in a word, the word is authentic assessments, authentic information on what this student does as a reader, as opposed to a multiple choice test that you get on Fridays, which may or may not reflect your accurate reading ability. It may reflect your ability to take a multiple choice test. I'm actually watching you read a book and noticing what you do when you read that book, and that's what's informing my teaching. Multiple choice tests, again, it's like it's a Common Core test, all these things. Is that a real authentic reading assessment? Not necessarily. But I agree, the danger would be you don't want to over-assess in any situation. And hopefully this wouldn't feel so much like an assessment as a Friday test that's like 10 multiple choice questions.
Yeah, and that's why in fifth grade, we decided to forego like the names web, because we felt we were getting a lot of information out of the kid. The other piece too, Bob, is what I'm noticing is, this is going to kind of even out the playing field in the sense of, you'll have a student who I call compliant. They do their homework, they study, they come in, they ace the test, they do pretty good, get 1 wrong, 2 wrong, but they struggle. That was the student I just observed. This is a student who, I looked at his report card, this kid's got a 95 average. He's at an S. He's at like the beginning, probably could have been like an R, but we pushed him, So, this is somebody who I would have thought would have went to a W, right? So that's kind of what's important about this too, is this gives you the idea, because we see it in all the grades. We talk about students who, again, come to school, do the right thing, parents support them at home. We have to do that more here. And the absence, again, of the assessment data. I know the assessments are bad, it's a bad word, the state assessments, but I used to sit down with my teachers, we used to get a lot of information when we had more students taking them. And then we talked about it at our last meeting, even the students who are taking them, some are after 10, 15 minutes, shutting the book. So how valuable is even the data that's produced from these assessments? So we really needed something to be able to tell us, kind of in a benchmarking way, what we can expect. And the younger the better.
And I would say even during the era when 100% of people took the test, years ago, before Common Core, during Common Core, the schools I was at always valued this more than that. Because this is what the student was doing every day in the class, during reading. This was our actual reading behavior as a reader. We always place more emphasis on a state test, you show up for 3 days, maybe you have a bad day, maybe this happens, like Pete said, maybe you woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day. But this tells me what you do every single day, and that is more accurate. We always thought it was more accurate gauge of the students.
I'll just become my comment is more towards not justifying the program, but giving the teachers the opportunity and the time to teach the skills, because from the skills come the enjoyment, from the enjoyment comes the fun, and you build a foundation that grows with that through years in terms of what they have to do. We are teaching a fundamental skill that requires the interaction with the teacher and the student, whether it's in a workshop program or a group setting. And it's not always driven by the benchmark assessment or whatever else you want to talk about. We also have to recognize the cost and the need to, I'll say the word teach, train the parent on how, when the day is ended, how to continue this process and focus on these fundamentals. That might be at the cost of some of the assignments that weren't picked up during the day. That I'd rather have the student read through things or write a program, write something out, have a journal, but do our parents know how to do that? That's what we did when we taught them the math side. Many of the parents came and said, I don't know how to help my child. I would dare say that even on the reading, how do I help my child grow?
And that was just Aaron's point, about, and then also, we were talking about this before the meeting, about I'm getting home stuff that says you read, I read, and doing a lot of the stuff that what the benchmark looks like, and I was happy to see that as a parent of a second and third grader. Those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of conversations we have to have at our parent-teacher conferences, instead of just giving out this sheet that says your child is at a level N, and the little box that says he's on grade level. No, I'd rather give the parent a packet of things that they can do that's on the child's grade level. Take the time, use that information, and say, here, this is what you can do till the next benchmark to help support us get them to that higher level.
And Bob, if we do go to the reading workshop model, that becomes part of their daily work, is they get a book bag and they're bringing books home and you're communicating, and it just becomes just part of their reading life. That it's not just always studying for tests, but they're choosing books that they want to read and are appropriate and they're bringing those home, that you can read with them and the teachers are communicating these are the skills we're working on. At open house, you're presenting, this is what the levels look like, these are the things, that's kind of the skills we're going to be working on this year and how they're going to grow, on kindergarten from A to E, things like that. So it just becomes part of their natural life, like Mr. Catlin said. It's so normal. In fact, my kids are like, how come I'm not reading with you right now? If I'm pulling kids one-on-one. And I'm in kindergarten right now, it's November. I do reading workshop and we're reading 30 minutes now cold. And in fact, we went over today. We were like so in it. I was like, oh my gosh, we have to go to gym. Like finally up, and I didn't get to my share. So, it can happen as early as kindergarten. It just becomes normal and natural and it doesn't feel like testing at all.
Don't you get to know your child better, your
And I
student
read
better?
them all the time. Today I read with my kids who are reading at almost 2nd grade in kindergarten, and my kids who are still having a hard time doing one-to-one matching. They're still struggling with that a lot. So I had 2 groups. I do a one-on-one, and the other kids were all reading. They have books in there. They're all engaged in what they're doing. They have choice in what they're reading, but they're reading appropriately and they want to do it. So it's a big, it's a big difference from Journeys, and it's a running record can be done with anything, anytime, anywhere. Informally, formally, a benchmark is just formal time where you're recording data, but it's done all the time. So it's very different from studying for the tests.
I'm glad we're leveling our libraries as well.
Yeah.
Because again, my son coming home today before the board meeting, I'm a little obsessed with this. We've been talking every day, 3 times a day about this. And it's good communication between us, the 2 buildings, myself. We're obsessed with it. So my son has Journeys, and what I experienced with Journeys, I borrow a book from our school so I can go over the stuff with them. Because that's one level for everybody. I would see struggling readers having a hard time with Journeys. And I look at the questions at the end, 2 of the questions, it could be either answer. And I spoke to his teacher and said, on that test, it could be either answer. She goes, you're right. I go, well, that stinks, for a young reader. And, going through it. So with level reading, what does he do? I'm reading a book with him on our own. The 2 of us read. I try to read as much as I can with him. He's reading a very challenging book. I can engage him if it's about pirates. It's about pirates. Young boy loses both parents. He's with an abusive relative. He runs away. He's on a ship. Very, very difficult language and the rest. And I check him on comprehension. He's right on it. So reading this book, which I would guess would be 4th, 5th grade level of read, at least. What does he do? He goes, one day's library day. He comes home with a book of frogs. I said, Kenneth, there's not even any language or sentences in it. But he picks, every week he comes home with a book that does not challenge him from the library. Now, if we were leveled, he would know his level reading, level in the classroom, go into his library, pick a book at his level. So he's challenged, not going for the kindergarten book. And that's what he gets away with, and the kids will try to do that. I can read this book real easy. I don't have to work hard at it. So that's just today. So I believe in addressing the kid, and you're going to hear this if you've been around for a long time, address you where you are with your skills and what you need. Where are your strengths? Address you at your level, and then watch you advance and grow. Don't give you a story that you don't understand. And you have to reach for it. And you get confused by the activities. So by being a parent, I am anti-Journeys right now. I can't help it. I know we have it in there, and it's a week-long story where I know my son gets bored. He would love the lots of books. He would love 8 to 10 small books a week. Love it. And that's what we're trying to get to. And, we're doing things differently that we've never done before. That's the key. We see weaknesses, we want to make it stronger and work at it. We want to work in harmony, in a unified manner. It's different schools, but we're using the same stuff and it makes sense. And both places. And teachers are really, right now, being hit with different things all of a sudden that they weren't hit with before, and we're requesting them to do because we believe it's better for our kids. And that's what's happening right now, Brad.
Is there, since there seems to be dissatisfaction with Journeys and how it's working for us, is there a plan to eliminate that?
Well, that's why we're phasing, and they have the intervention kits we just got, which provide books, level reading books. PTO has been gracious enough to give Rob money to buy more. We're seeing what we have on hand to level. We have a young librarian who is looking at what we got and leveling our library. Then she's working with teachers in their classrooms to level the reading. I will be looking into other people's funds this year to borrow money for more level readers and get as much as we can. But, you know, we're looking at that shift. If we have to go to a level reading program which works in harmony with our writing program, so be it. And then the teachers won't struggle as much because everything will be aligned between the writing and the reading, and it's all levels, addressing our kids where they are. So right now we're searching, I would say we're searching for as many materials as we can to get teachers. Now here's another thing. They were all totally trained by Houghton Mifflin and Journeys. So now you're going to have to undo that, suck that out of their brain, and have this different approach. So I'm going to, give our teachers some credit. They're going through a lot, but I do believe our kids are better writers. That might be why the second grade is so strong. They've had three full years of full day K and the writing program, and they're pretty strong right now. They will get stronger, and I think if we bring in this other program, we're going to see a lot of good things.
So is it fair to say that that transition is going to take a little while, we'll build up the necessary volume of books?
I'll tell you, the bond will take longer.
What's that?
The bond will take longer. No, the Journeys, hopefully all that will happen as soon as we can. Resources, what we're struggling for right now.
I mean, if right now I said Journeys is gone, we would have nothing, which is a problem.
Sure.
But I think it's a matter of making, we still need a curriculum. And you will catch me say the one good thing about Journeys is like any program, it has a scope and sequence. So the teachers are making sure they're hitting the standards right now. Do I think Journeys does it in the best way? No, I don't. But I think right now you can't just throw out, the baby with the bathwater. You can't just throw everything out. You got to make sure you're ready to make that transition, and that's the process.
I'm knocking into certain things I've seen, but I'll tell you what, I have seen some Journeys stuff, like a poem that goes with the story, accompanying literature, and some of the activities are not bad. But it is a kid with this story that he might not get for a whole week. And there are better ways to do it.
So I think between Bob and Brad and Renee, many of the questions have been answered, but so Gordon came to us, over a year ago and talked about reading and said, hey, we need to do some things to strengthen the reading program. We essentially, gave him the blessing, go for it. Fill us in what's going on, go for it. We're here where we are tonight. So I guess my question for both of you and for Gordon is, I know this piece, and I'll say it, Fontes and Pinnell, is new. I know you like it because of your history in the city. The future, and I mean, in a couple months, in a year,
Sure.
do you see that this is the program that we should be sticking with? I know it's new to us. Is there something else that we should also be looking at? And to make this successful, what do we need to do to finish implementing this?
So I would say you're correct that Fannis and Pinnell is the start. So Fannis and Pinnell is a way, it's an assessment system to figure out what level from A to Z the kid is reading on. And the intervention kits that we've started are a way to intervene for the kids who aren't there. What we're missing right now is a core curriculum that addresses those issues. And that is, I think, the next step to take. Okay, now we've assessed, we know where our students are, we know what we want to teach them, we know how to intervene, like the intervention kits, if they're not there. The problem is the curriculum, just in general, the reading core curriculum. That's the place. And I would say we're already using Teachers College Writing. Teachers College Reading is a natural connection. Even at the reading last week, they said, if you were doing the mysteries unit in reading, you'd be able to do this in writing. It's a mesh together, philosophically, academically. I think that's the missing piece moving forward.
Lindsay, I'll put you on the spot. You have a great literacy background. You're a literacy person. Are we doing the right thing, Fox? No.
I've used it in Boston, and I think I'm sorry, it's late. I've used it in Boston, and I think it's fantastic. I'm excited to use it here, and I'm excited to start the intervention. And we've talked about how to implement it in the first grade, trying to really flood them and catch them in first grade so that they're working as not as many reading problems going forward. And it is the first grade level that can really catch them before they're 2 levels below. Because they were saying once it's 2 levels below, they'll kind of be with intervention forever. So if we can catch them before that point, this is the way to do it, and I'm excited to start doing it.
Now, I'm really excited about the prospect of matching books to readers. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. The anthologies, everybody's reading one story. And as Mr. Kaplan said, it's very difficult for many of the children. With the Fontes and Cannell and the Reader's Workshop model, we're matching books to readers, and they're reading on their instructional and their independent level. And they're reading a lot. And another thing about, just going back to Mr. Sweeney, your question about the assessments, already I'm seeing teachers tweaking their teaching as a result of the benchmarking. Because we're taking a look at the types of questions that stump the kids. Questions like, how does this theme pertain to your life? Or how did the character change in the story? What is the genre of the story? Or how does the writer, how did the author catch your interest, your attention in the story? And teachers are seeing that kids got stumped on those questions just through the natural discussions they were having with them. And they're adding those into their discussions in everyday reading instruction. So it's just through discussion, not through a multiple choice test, but through discussion and seeing children's responses or their lack of responses, they're tweaking their discussions that they're having in their reading instruction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So.
Right.
One last question. For now. I've got others.
I know you got a million.
But at the beginning, you said that because of our 40% participation rate in the state testing, that's taken away some of our ability and some of our tools to evaluate where students are and where to focus resources.
Yeah, let me just, one sentence in there. The Regis gave you, and you can jump in, your child's strengths and weaknesses in math and ELA, but it also has a built-in projection piece that will tell you your child's success on either the 4th grade, 8th grade, or 11th grade Regis exam. What progress are they making as they approach those major exams? That's a big indicator, and that's one that a lot of parents didn't realize.
Yeah, it also gave us,
assessment gave us.
internal gap analysis with the curriculum and identified subgroups in terms of if we need to do reading interventions with certain groups. It also was an indicator of a student who would need or was eligible for academic intervention services. So all those pieces now, when you don't have that meaningful data coming out of, it's called BARS, Eastern Suffolk BOCES provides it, that we don't have anymore. And we've been working with the data liaison from Eastern Suffolk BOCES to try and provide that, and basically she's coming back with the same thing, that we just don't have enough of a subgroup, or even in special ed, all these areas that have these different, who need to differentiate, it's just not there. So that's why.
So that goes to my question. If we no longer have some of those tools and we're trying to supplement it with other things like BOCES or you mentioned AimsWeb, does that have an additional cost that we have to expend resources on in order to try to get that data?
No, the only cost we're citing right now is for the level readers, which we know, and we're getting that together, and hopefully that's the big cost right now, so we can address the kids where they are.
And as I said to Mr. Sweeney, I think even if 100% of kids took tests, we would still want this
You still want
information.
this.
We would still want to
I've
know
seen
it, and it would still
to Mr.
inform our
Riggio's
teaching.
point, seeing this in action, first of all, as a middle school person, it really, I hope that it gets done K-4 so that we don't have those, deficiencies that come up. But most importantly, it gives the teachers, like Ms. Canizaro said, that information about how to present their ELA lessons, about how to present their social studies, science lessons. And that's why it was important for each homeroom teacher to do their own class, and the reading teacher supported it. Because for me, the next step, obviously here is a little different. We're by a bell schedule. So, that reading piece is going to be tricky when we try to incorporate. But if that workshop approach is K to 4, we're going to be able to get back to, what we're doing here, which is preparing students to meet the Regents exam standards and the upper standards. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's really, bringing in the reading and writing workshop and being able to focus on reading rather than just taking the test at the end of the week, like everybody's echoed. That's paid off dividends. That's going to pay off dividends. Yeah.
When will the AIS children start seeing the interventions that you're starting?
So I would say kids who've been in AIS were already getting other interventions. We're targeting starting the LOI officially after Thanksgiving. We just got the kits this week. There was like 19 boxes that came. We had to sort them. Now the next process is that was the easy part. Now it's like sorting the kids. So maybe, before 4 kids who were on B were in this group and 3 kids were here, maybe we need to switch the groups around. And so now it's scheduling and figuring it out. And our goal is to start right after Thanksgiving.
So the kids will start seeing changes.
Let's hope. Yeah, that's the goal. So the goal would be, let's reevaluate it after 6 to 8 weeks, and let's see if they've grown. And if not, either we stick with the program, change programs, and probably kid by kid basis. But we're starting 6 to 8 weeks after Thanksgiving, and the goal would be to start catching them up and hopefully see some progress.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Catlin, Mr. Karmakaris. Nice job, and we'll be getting another presentation in January, and then another one at the end of the year. So we're going to constantly be keeping track of our children's progress, our teachers' progress, and hopefully, our budget mix for the upcoming year will reflect that as well. So now we're at the point in the program where you can ask a question regarding the agenda, and then at the end of the agenda, we'll have time to ask any school-related questions. So, would anybody like to ask a question about the agenda right now? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you don't have to talk about that.
You had that look on your
Yes,
face.
I know.
Okay.
I have questions on 3 items, 10A, 10C, and 10E. For 10A, the increased rate of pay, was this part of the budget, and what's the impact on the budget?
Substitute rate.
That it was increased.
Yes.
We have had, as many districts have, experienced extremely challenging time getting a sub. And we made it clear to the board that we couldn't get subs. It was difficult to run training due to lack of subs. Various challenge days at the high school, lack of subs. And we had, and Maureen can tell you, we had people actually call and ask, what do you pay? And when we said $90, I said, thank you. And it was over. So we slightly increased these rates, and believe it or not, it's not a great increase, but people are calling, and we are getting, and we went on OLAS as well. We are getting substitutes.
And we wanted parity with the neighboring districts and what they were paying, so that it would be at least competitive in terms of the substitute pay.
What's the impact on the budget?
At this point, I don't think it's that great. We do have enough in the budget to cover this.
when we do the budget workshops, I'd be interested in seeing what that difference is, because I know we're tracking everything very carefully. For 10C, for obsolete equipment, everything is listed as disposal. There's some things that are electronic, but on the addendum on the back for things, there's e-waste. Just wondering if that's just mislabeled as being put in the dumpster, or if those electronic things are going to be recycled for e-waste.
I was seeing books, are you on the left, Brad, under C directly?
Yeah, for under
That's
C,
electronic?
there's an HP color LaserJet. I think there was something else in there. There was a calculator, I think, in there. Just some
They normally go into an e-waste system. I see what you're saying with the discards, so maybe it wasn't specified, but we can find out.
Okay.
Okay, do you know if any of those things are electronic on the?
We can get them into the e-waste. We can get them into the e-waste. It's probably mislabeled.
Okay, thanks. And then my last question was, when you discuss the Perkins grants, if you can just kind of tell us a little bit about what that is.
Perkins Grants comes from BOCES, and I can tell you, define it through how we're going to use the money. It goes to vocational programs. We're able to get the Perkins Grant for our VE program, Virtual Enterprise, which is giving them opportunities, and our culinary program, to do things like field trips, and one field trip in particular for culinary is to the Culinary Institute of America, which will be a great experience for our kids, and some trips to the city as well. Educational field trips, and it's not a lot of money, a couple thousand, but it'll pay for those trips to give our kids great experiences.
Just to add to that, with that one, Larry Roberts on the record is the one who went out, researched this, found opportunities for grants that we had not ever applied to, and supplemented our program by his good efforts to come up with these funds. We were successful in the grant, and he was able to apply the money towards these field trips. His own effort to do it. So good for him.
Especially, it's an opportunity to open kids' eyes to things they might not have considered as an occupation.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, back to business. Personnel resignation, Pete?
Personnel resignation. Clerk typist part-time, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mary Wills, part-time clerk typist, effective November 30th, 2017.
Second. Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Instructional ed?
Part-time family and consumer science teacher, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment for Tracy Larkin as a family and consumer science teacher to start no later than January 26, 2018, step F, MA at a 0.6 position, certification initial.
Tracy, you're here?
Right here.
This is Tracy Larkin.
Nice to meet you all.
Welcome aboard, Tracy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And the second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Tracy is about to join us, but she's presently employed in another district, and New York State law sometimes requires an existing teacher to give 30 days notice. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but at any rate, no later than January 26th. We'll be happy to have you aboard. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Speech.
Sure, part-time speech teacher, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment. Jennifer Takis, speech teacher, appointment date November 27, 2017, step A, MA, .4 position, certification is permanent.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Bob?
Family and consumer science substitute teacher, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent Superintendent's Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment. Diane Amato, they can leave, but they always come back. October 30th, 2017 through no later than January 26, 2018, substitute teacher, $200 a day.
Second. Thank you, Lynn.
And she's covering until Ms. Larkin can join us.
We had a resignation last month, which created this opening and gap that we needed to fill. And so Mrs. Amato, who worked for over 30 years in the district, was kind enough to agree to come back and stay for as long as we needed. So that explains the difference in substitute for that. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Lynn, instructional substitute?
Instructional substitute. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointees as listed below at a compensation rate of $111 a day.
Second.
Thank you, Pete. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Non-instructional, Carrie?
Non-instructional substitutes. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointments. Jenna Smith on October 5th, 2017 as a substitute RN at $125 a day, and Rosemary Sabatelli on November 6th, 2017 as a school district aide at step 1 compensation.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Pete, coaches?
Seek other coaches. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointments. Corey Testa, Monday, November 16, 2017. Area girls winter and spring track as a volunteer. James Walker, November 16, 2017. Varsity wrestling, also as a volunteer.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Ed, special ed?
Committee on Special Education. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education has no objections to the following special education recommendations and approves the authorization for the funds to implement the special education programs and services consistent with such as listed.
Second. Thank you, Lynn. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Mike, impartial hearing officer?
Sure, impartial hearing officer. Resolved upon the recommendation, I apologize, resolved, am I missing something? Oh, okay, resolved. The Board of Education hereby appoints Dr. Yes, please.
Yeah, the bottom.
Try this again. Resolved, the Board of Education hereby appoints Dr. James Monk as the impartial hearing officer for case number 509958, effective November 16, 2017.
Second. Thank you, Lynn. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Substitute rate of pay, Todd?
Substitute rate of pay. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following rate of pay amounts for substitute teachers effective October 23rd, 2017, days 1 through 50, $111 per day, days 50 plus, and $125 per day. Substitute even for the same teacher for 10 consecutive days shall be paid at $125 a day on the 11th day. Substitute custodians grounds effective October 23rd, 2017. Custodian $13.25 per hour, and grounds personnel $13.25 an hour. And finally, substitutes, aides, and clerical. Aides and clerical effective January 23rd, 2016, $11 an hour. Aides clerical effective January 1st, 2018, $11.75. Thereafter, every January 1st, that said amount shall be increased by 75 cents.
Second. Thank you, Lynn. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Donations, Lynn?
Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the donation of 28 quarter zip pullovers valued at $1,540 from Triton Bay Wealth Advisors for the middle school boys soccer team.
You said that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments?
One comment, thank you to Triton Bay Wealth Advisors for their generosity to our athletics program.
Thank you, Louis.
Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Obsolete equipment, Carrie?
Sure. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby declares the following items as obsolete and authorizes disposal as listed.
Second.
Thank you, Pete. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Concussion specialist. Pete.
D, concussant specialist. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the addition of Andrew Lanzone, DO, to the list of concussion specialists.
Say that, please. Second. Thank you, Lynn. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Ed Perkins?
Perkins Grant field trips. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Education of the Mount Sinai District Board of Education agrees that participation of students in educational field trips, which are funded through monies in the Perkins for Basic Secondary Grant, known as the grant, represent an educational opportunity for students of the school district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the participation of students from the school district to participate in said educational field trips in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grant, and be it further resolved that such field trips shall be hosted by Eastern Suffolk BOCES in collaboration with the school district because the grant requires
As listed.
as listed.
Thank you, Ed.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? Spoke about this, explained it a little to Brad, so we're very excited about this. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And Mike?
Sure. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following resolution. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the attached field trip request being paid through the CTEIA Perkins grant as written below, as listed for those field trips.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bob, obsolete equipment technology.
Obsolete equipment, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby declares the attached list of items in the technology department as obsolete and authorizes disposal as listed. We're just going to check with Mr. Jockers. It's not open.
Tammy, you want to just make a comment on this, these materials?
Well, most of the items are old. That's basically the reason for obsoleting. Some of the items have become damaged and no longer work. So that's basically what we're, like you'll see some first generation iPads, 3 of those. One, the battery doesn't work anymore. The other 2 have been handed back to me, so there's no use just keeping them in a closet.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we finished the business portion, and we are at the point where community members may ask questions regarding our schools, our programs, our properties. Are you all questioning Ash? Are you waiting?
I think I've had my share for the
You
day.
have. Anybody besides Mr. Arrington wish to ask a question? Once, twice?
I have a question.
Come on.
My son is a 10th grade student. He's requested to, well, he's asked us if he could attend BOCES, the aviation program. I had a discussion last year, or last school year, with Mr. McAvoy and also with the superintendent. we were given certain different answers about why he could not attend, which sort of perplexed me why I'm getting different answers from different people. But my question is, and I was told that I should come to the November meeting because it was supposed to be addressed this meeting. And I'm just wondering what's the status of the possibility. I know there's other students also that were interested in attending the aviation program for the BOCES. And I'm just wondering what's the school board's decision, or what are they doing to make this possibility?
So, last month, the folks behind you brought up the same issue, and we promised them that we would meet with some BOCES people and discuss it. So, in fact, today, for an hour, the director and principal of Milliken came and discussed the contracts, the prices, the busing, programs, the criteria, the rubrics, and gave us a lengthy introduction to their current program, along with pricing that we're aware of. So now the board has to have time to absorb the information and discuss it. We have a meeting, a bond workshop meeting coming up December 4th. So before that, we can go into executive because it's a contract to discuss it, and we should have a decision at that point for you. The reason it didn't happen before, it wasn't budgeted, so if the board decides that this is something that they wish to offer, it will go into the upcoming 2018-2019 school budget.
Correct. All right.
If I could add just one piece. When we spoke with BOCES tonight, it wasn't specifically about just an aviation program. So it was about the entire program and the different courses they offer different students, and a breakdown of a number of different things. So it was a program in general.
Well,
all the different programs, because there are a number of parents who are registered in BOCES, not just for aviation, but also other programs.
well, one of the issues that I had was when I was told that my son wasn't eligible for BOCES because he's not special ed, sort of did not sit well with me, because my son's not a special ed student, he's not able to attend BOCES, and that's the answer I get from a school district member. That sort of disturbs me.
Well, it was...
Are we discriminating against our students?
We are not. We are following the law, the IDEA law that requires special ed students with an IEP or 504 plan to be in the least restrictive environment. So if the CSE meeting determines that, then we must comply with that. That is the law, not just an arbitrary...
I understand that.
distinction.
Being told that my son's not special ed, so he's not allowed to go to BOCES, to me is an issue. And I think that should be addressed.
That's an interesting topic. I don't think this is the forum to debate it, but I can only tell you why the school district had been sending special ed or kids with IEPs to BOCES, because it was the law, and we have to comply with that. As far as I know, there's no law that determines that the gen ed or like your son is required by law to have a pick and choose, because there's schools of performing arts. There's many other alternative schools, if you will. I don't mean an alternative, but other avenues and opportunities for high schoolers. There's a School of Science in Nassau County. So there are other places. So, it's really up to, the parents of the community and the school board to come to a decision that makes sense for their school district for these other not required programs.
I think what was last month was I encouraged my colleagues to explore the extraordinary changes that have occurred over the past 5, 6, 7 years in BOCES. Many years ago, it wasn't, I don't want to say run smartly, but there was continued costs, and every year it just kept going up. And the programs that they are offering is not an alternative, it's a supplement to our program. And it is some extraordinary opportunities, whether it's aviation or something else. There are rubrics that they set up as to whether or not a student is eligible, has to do with grades, attendance. It boils down to commitment. We listened to the young man who has for years been learning about aviation and demonstrated huge commitment to it. These are the things that we may want to, as we look at the costs and things like that, with BOCES, how do we supplement our program to allow students like this who demonstrate that high level commitment to explore that? And they go from 6:45 in the morning until about 10:45, about fourth or fifth period, and then return to their regular core classes. It's an exciting opportunity. We have to study it. We have to look at what are the overall costs, and more importantly, from our end of the district side, what would be the methods that we would have for opportunities for these students who are interested, who demonstrate that level of commitment. So I think this is a very positive step, pending discussions about expenses. But I thank the parents who came and urged us to do this. BOCES has done a great deal to change their program. Their offerings are huge in terms of what they offer. And more importantly, it is not intended to be an alternative program, but intended to be a supplement to what is a very successful school district. So my encouragement is for real. I look forward to further discussions with my colleagues about this. And we have to have our budgetary discussions of it going forward, but it's very good to see what BOCES has done for this program.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Okay. They have a meeting on December 4th, I think you said?
Yes, I believe it's
Now, how will we be notified if it's going through, or?
Well,
I mean,
my suggestion is they have open house both during the day, and they have an evening program for the parents. There is just the introductory process to learn about it and things like that. I've asked if I can go and tour. We've met with one of the principals. There is a process going forward. Your son is a sophomore going into junior, is that correct?
Yes.
Both? So the program is offered for junior and senior. So as we progress, we're going to be looking at where we would be, and they need to have some understanding where we're going to be, I think, in February. Is that correct?
Yeah,
It's about February.
February is when the open house and the visitations are. Some of the board members are actually going to visit the BOCES facility for a look-see, just to be sure that this is, if we decide that we will do that. So there's a very robust conversation. Mr. Grable and Mr. Dyrup were both in attendance. So we had the high school piece of it as well, and the BOCES component, as well as the board members. So I think we were given a very good, comprehensive explanation and description of what is available. So now 7 of us need to come up with a decision. And so that hopefully, I have no promises, but hopefully, since we didn't have time, we finished at 8 o'clock. So we'll have an opportunity to discuss it further.
Let me just add, I worked with BOCES for years in my prior district, and that particular BOCES, many districts dropped out from because of costs, poorly organized, and things that occurred at that time, so much that William Floyd put 7 of their own programs in place and left BOCES. But what I heard tonight, and the board paid great attention, asked great questions, and committed an hour early of their time. This is a different BOCES. It is not as expensive perhaps as some of us thought. And again, I'm totally cognizant of both of you because we have spoken. And, we spoke about other students. I'm thinking of the other students who don't really fit in the square peg of the high school, perhaps if they're rounder, and they need other programs as well. But a lot of things I want to make sure, as Mr. Sweeney said, that kids are sure if they're leaving the school for half the day, and they have to be able to give that up. They won't be with their friends all day. They won't be with their girlfriend all day. And sometimes that affects kids. It really does. I've seen it. So, and there's an application process. You're interest in aeronautics might be the most rigorous process of all to be admitted to that program, but it is a great one. It is a different program, and the board is totally entertaining this. It's not just giving an answer to push you off. I can guarantee you that. And, we do hear you. So we'll be talking about it.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming in early. It's greatly appreciated. We just want what's best for our sons, what they feel.
You're welcome.
best. We did also discover that in addition to the tuition that we would pay, for certain programs that they offer, there are additional expenses which they bill to the parents. Flight time, licenses, uniforms, all this kind of stuff. So that it's a shared kind of deal.
Yes, we went to the open house last year just to get an idea of what it would be, even though Christian was in ninth grade. And they informed of all this. And, I mean, it's very understandable there's certain things that has to be done. But, yeah, we were explaining that whole idea. But,
We're
yeah.
well aware of it. So we just want you to say yes.
But yeah, we appreciate everything you did from last month to this month, that you put yourselves out.
Progress is our most important product.
But hopefully, if you, I know some of the other presentations, you guys speak to the other neighboring districts, that probably would help. So I know Portchester still does it, and I know somebody that's in that program and they love it. And the new member of the fire department, and she just enjoys it. And she's having a blast doing it. So she's talked to my son already. They already know a little bit about what it's about. She wanted to get firsthand what it is, how do they go about, besides what he's done already, as far as flying experience.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Are there any other questions, comments? So have a happy Thanksgiving, a healthy vacation, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Second. Thank you for coming.